What does it really mean to accept a brain that experiences the world differently? What does it mean to stop asking, how do we make this child look more normal? And start asking instead, what does this child need to feel safe, to feel understood, regulated, and respected? What does it mean for parents, teachers, clinicians, churches, families, and communities to stop seeing autistic individuals as problems to manage and start seeing them as human beings to understand? Season 2, Episode 6, Autism Acceptance, Seeing the World Through a Different Lens. Our subtitle today is Neurodiversity, Sensory Processing, and Why Acceptance Must Replace Correction. What we've been calling behavior. There is a child sitting in a classroom right now whose brain is processing every flicker of the fluorescent light, every hum of the AC, every shuffle of feet, every whisper across the room. While other children may be able to filter out the noise and focus on the lesson, this child's nervous system is receiving everything at once. The light is not just light. The hum is not just background noise. The whisper across the room is not soft. The chair scraping against the floor is not minor. The tag in the shed is not just a tag. The movement around the room is not invisible to them. It is all information, and it is all arriving with intensity. Now, imagine being that child and being told to sit still. Imagine being that child and being told to pay attention. Imagine being that child and being told, look at me when I'm talking to you. Imagine being that child and expected to regulate your body, organize your thought, control your emotions, interpret social expectations, and perform like everyone else while your nervous system is already flooded. And then imagine that when you finally cover your ears, rock back and forth, you put down your head, refuse to speak, run from the room, or melt down. The adults around you call it bad behavior. They call it defiance. They call it non-compliance. They call it manipulation. They call it disrespect. They call it attention seeking. They call it disruption. They call it something that needs to be corrected. And in that moment, the child learns something painful. Not that the world is too loud, not that the environment is too much, not that their nervous system is overwhelming. They learn, quote and unquote, I am the problem. And that is where so much harm begins. Not because autism itself is shameful, but because misunderstanding turns difference into shame. Misunderstanding turns sensory overload into punishment. Misunderstanding turns communication differences into character flaws. Misunderstanding turns nervous system distress into discipline problems. But what if that child is not broken? Have you thought about that? What if that child is not difficult? What if that child is not trying to ruin the classroom, embarrass the parents, frustrate the teacher, or challenge authority? What if that child's brain is simply wired differently? And the world we keep placing them in was never designed with their nervous system in mind. I am C.D. Justinsky, family nurse practitioner and psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. I am your host of Healing the Mind and Empowering the Soul podcast. And today we are talking about autism acceptance, seeing the world through a different lens. This is season 2, as I said earlier, and neurodiversity, sensory processing, and why acceptance must replace correction. Today, I do not want us to have a surface level conversation about autism. I do not want us to simply repeat phrases we have heard during Autism Awareness Month and then move on. I want us to sit with the deeper question. What does it really mean to accept a brain that experiences the world differently? What does it mean to stop asking, how do we make this child look more normal? And start asking instead, what does this child need to feel safe, to feel understood, regulated, and respected? What does it mean for parents, teachers, clinicians, churches, families, and communities to stop seeing autistic individuals as problems to manage and start seeing them as human beings to understand? Because awareness, my dear friends, says, I know autism exists, but acceptance says, I am willing to change how I show up. Awareness notices the diagnosis, acceptance honors the person. Awareness can still keep someone at a distance, but acceptance makes room for that person. Awareness says, I see that you are different. Acceptance says, different does not mean less. And that is the lens I want us to use today. So we have to learn to understand autism beyond the stereotypes. Autism is a neurodevelopmental difference. It affects how a person processes sensory information, communication, relates socially, regulates emotions, responds to change, and experiences the environment. But one of the reasons autism is so misunderstood is because people often expect it to look one way. They expect one image, one presentation, one personality, one level of functioning, one kind of child. And that is not autism, my dear friends. Autism exists across a spectrum. And when we say spectrum, we are not talking about a straight line from mild to severe. We are talking about a wide range of strengths, challenges, needs, communication styles, sensory experiences, learning profiles, and nervous system patterns. One autistic child may be highly verbal and academically gifted, but unable to tolerate certain sounds, textures, or transitions. Another autistic child may be minimally verbal or non-speaking, but deeply observant, emotionally aware, and capable of communicating through gestures, devices, writing, or behavior. One autistic adult may have a successful career and still come home completely depleted from masking all day long. Another may need significant daily support and still have preferences, personality, humor, dignity, and purpose. Autism does not erase humanity. No, autism does not erase intelligence or emotions. Autism does not erase spiritual worth. And this is important because the world often confuses speech with intelligence, eye contact with honesty, stillness with attention, and compliance with wellness. But many autistic individuals challenge these assumptions or stereotypes. A child may not look at you and still be listening, and a teenager may not speak in class and still understand everything being taught. An adult may appear calm, but be internally overwhelmed. A person may communicate differently and still have a rich inner world. And if we are not careful, we will mistake unfamiliar communication for absence. We will mistake difference for deficit. The autistic brain often processes the world with a kind of intensity that many neurotypical people do not fully understand. Sounds may be sharper, light may be harsher, social demands may require a lot of conscious effort from them. Transitions may feel destabilizing. Unpredictability may trigger anxiety. Physical sensations may feel amplified. And when we do not understand this, we expect autistic individuals to tolerate things that may actually be painful, draining, or overwhelming for them. That is why autism acceptance must begin with humility. It begins with admitting the way I experience the world is not the only way the world can be experienced. It begins with recognizing that my comfort should not be the standard by which I measure someone else's distress. Just because a sound does not bother me does not mean it is not painful to someone else. Just because I can tolerate a crowded room does not mean everyone can. Just because eye contact feels respectful to me does not mean it feels safe to someone else. Acceptance requires us to stop centering our own nervous system as the default. The autistic nervous system, when the world feels too loud, interprets data otherwise. Let's talk about sensory processing because this is one of the most important part of autism and one of the most misunderstood. In many neurotypical brains, sensory information gets filtered automatically. Okay, the brain decides what deserves attention and what can fade into the background. You may walk into a room and hear the air conditioner for a moment, but after a while, you stop noticing it. You may feel the fabric of your shirt when you first put it on, but then it disappears from your awareness. You may hear people talking in the hallway, but still focus on the person in front of you. For many autistic individuals, that filtering system works differently. The brain may not dampen sensory input in the same way. Instead of certain sounds, lights, textures, or movement fading into the background, they remain present constantly, consistently. They continue demanding attention, continue registering in their body. Now imagine what that means over the course of an entire day. Imagine waking up and the texture of your clothing is already irritating your skin. Imagine brushing your teeth and the sensation feels overwhelming. Imagine walking into a kitchen and the smell of food is too strong for you. Imagine getting into a car and the seatbelt feels restrictive. Imagine arriving at school or work and the lights are too bright for you. The room is too loud for you. The expectations are unclear and the social demands begin immediately. By the time someone asks you to sit down and pay attention, your nervous system may already be halfway to overload. So when we see an autistic child meltdown at 10 a.m., we often think the meltdown started at 10 a.m. No, but clinically, we have to understand that the build-up may have started hours before. The nervous system may have been accumulating stress all morning long. The meltdown may not be the beginning, it may be the point where the body could no longer hold what had already been building. That is why meltdowns are not tantrums. A tantrum is typically goal-oriented, right? A child wants something, does not get it, and uses behavior to try to obtain the desired outcome. A meltdown is different. A meltdown is a nervous system event. It happens when the brain and the body become overwhelmed beyond their ability to regulate. And at that point, reasoning may not work. Lecturing may not work. Threats may make it worse, as a matter of fact. Shame will almost certainly make it worse. What the person needs is safety, reduced input, calm presence, and, yes, time. But we live in a world that often pushes or punishes dysregulation instead of understanding it. We demand explanation from children whose brains are offline. We ask, why did you do that? When they may not have access to language in that moment. We insist on eye contact when their nervous system is already overloaded. We raise our voices when what they need is less stimulation. And then we wonder why things escalate. If we are serious about autism acceptance, my dear people, we have to become more nervous system informed. We have to learn to ask, what is this behavior communicating? What's happening or what happened before this? What sensory, emotional, social, or environmental demand exceeded this person's capacity? What support was missing? What can we adjust before the next crisis? Because when we ask better questions, we create better care. So let me give you guys a hypothetical clinical scenario. This child was labeled aggressive. I want to take the time into this because this is where the conversation becomes real. Imagine a young boy who has been labeled aggressive. The word follows him everywhere. It appears in school notes, provider conversation, family discussion, and behavior reports. Aggressive, unsafe, difficult, impulsive, disruptive. And once that label attaches to a child, people stop seeing the child clearly. They begin seeing the label first. The child would push, hit, scream, and sometimes throw objects. Staff become cautious around him. Some adults approach him already tense, already guarded, already expecting escalation. And children can feel that energy, remember? They know when people are afraid of them. They know when they are being watched like a threat. They may not have the words for it, but their bodies know. At first glance, the behavior looked random. But when you slow down and map the pattern, the picture changes. His escalations happen during loud transitions, during crowded hallway movements, during unexpected changes, and especially when someone touched him without warning. Now, the pattern was not random at all. His nervous system was reacting to threat, unpredictability, and sensory overload. So the question changed. We stopped asking only, how do we stop the aggression? And start asking instead, what is his body trying to protect him from? That question matters because if we only try to stop behavior without understanding its function, We may suppress the signal without while leaving the distress untouched. For this child, unexpected touch was a major trigger. A teacher gently placing a hand on his shoulder to redirect him may have seemed harmless to the adult, but to him it felt startling, intrusive, and unsafe. His body reacted because his thinking brain could not catch up. In clinical terms, he was moving into a fight response, not because he was bad, not because he wanted to hurt anyone, but because his nervous system perceived danger. Once the team understood this, the intervention changed. Adults stopped touching him without warning him. They used verbal cues before approaching. They created more predictable routines for this kid. They offered sensory breaks before transition. They reduced hallway crowding when possible. They gave him a designated calm space that was not used as punishment but as regulation, and the aggression decreased. Not because someone finally scared him into behaving, not because he was shamed into behaving, not because he was forced to compliance. It decreased because the environment became safer for his nervous system. That is the difference between correction and understanding. Correction says, stop doing that. Understanding says, what need is underneath this, and how do we support it before the behavior escalates? I'll give you yet another clinical scenario. There's a child who cried every morning before school. Now, I want to talk about a different presentation, right? So if this child cries every morning before school, the parent is exhausted, the child is distressed, the family routine is tense. At first, people call it separation anxiety. Then maybe, maybe they call it school refusal. Then maybe someone says the child is being manipulative or trying to avoid responsibility. But when you look deeper, the child's body is not trying to avoid learning. The child's body is trying to avoid overload. This child knows what school feels like. They might not be able to explain it clearly, but their nervous system remembers. The cafeteria is too loud. The classroom is too bright. The fire drill last week was terrifying for this kid. The teacher changes the schedule without warning. The other kids bump into them in line. The smell of lunch is overwhelming. The group activity is confusing. The child is full of demands that require more regulation than the child can handle. So by morning, before the child even arrives at school, their body is already bracing for impact. Their tears are not manipulation. No, their refusal is not laziness, it is anticipation of distress. This is where parents often feel torn. They want to be compassionate, but they also do not want to reinforce avoidance. And that is understandable. But the answer is not simply forcing the child through distress without support. The answer is identifying what makes school safe or feel unsafe and creating accommodations that reduce the nervous system overload. For this child, support might include a quiet arrival routine, noise reducing headphones, visual schedule, access to sensory breaks, reduce exposure to crowded transitions, and a trusted adult who understands the child's cues. Now, the goal is not to remove every challenge from life. The goal is to create enough safety that the child can engage. Because children learn best when they feel regulated. They connect best when they feel regulated. They communicate best when they feel regulated. And if we keep forcing this regulation, children in environments that are overwhelming, we should not be surprised when their bodies resist this. So let's talk again yet about another clinical scenario. The child who never spoke in class, right? So this child is quiet, observant, and often overlooked. Teachers may describe him or her as shy, withdrawn, or disengaged. Some may assume she does not understand the materials. Others may think she lacks confidence, but when she is assessed one-on-one, she is thoughtful, articulate, and deeply intelligent. So what is happening? What is happening, guys? The classroom environment may demand rapid verbal response, social confidence, group participation, unpredictable peer reactions, and immediate processing. For some autistic children, that combination is too much. It is not that they have nothing to say, it is that the environment does not support the way they organize and express their thoughts. This child may need more processing time. She may communicate better through writing. She may participate more effectively with advance notice. She may need questions ahead of time. She may need an alternative way to demonstrate knowledge. But if the classroom only values quick verbal participation, her intelligence may remain hidden. And this is one of the tragedies of misunderstanding autism. We often fail to see ability because we are looking for it in only one form. We expect intelligence to speak quickly. Hmm. We expect engagement to look like eye contact. We expect understanding to look like immediate response. But many autistic children process deeply and respond differently. So when this child was given written response options, more time to prepare, and structured opportunities to participate, her voice emerged. Not because it suddenly appeared, but because the environment finally made room for it. That is acceptance in practice, guys. It does not lower the expectation that the child can learn. It changes the pathway by which the child can show what they know. I'll give yet another clinical scenario, right? The teenager mislabeled as depressed. Now let's move into adolescence because many autistic teens are misunderstood in the ways that have serious mental health consequences. So, in this particular case, she is withdrawn, exhausted, and socially avoidant. She spends hours alone after school. She seems emotionally flat. Her parents are worried. Her teachers say she does not participate much. Her friends think she is distant. At first glance, depression seems like the obvious expectation or explanation. And maybe depression is present, maybe. But if we stop there, we may miss the root. As we explore deeper, we learn that she spends her entire school day masking. She forces herself to smile at the right times. She studies facial expressions. She rehearses what to say. She pushes herself through lunch, even though the cafeteria overwhelms her. She tries not to steam because she does not want to be judged. She pretends not to be bothered by sounds, smells, and social confusion. She holds herself together all day, then she gets home and collapses. Her withdrawal is not rejection, it is recovery. Her silence is not attitude, it is depletion. Her irritability is not disrespect, it is the nervous system finally releasing what it has held all day long. And when this pattern repeats for months or years, burnout can look like depression, anxiety can build, shame can deepen. The child may begin to believe everyone else can handle life. Why can't I? That belief is painful and it is often built on comparison to people whose nervous systems are not carrying the same load. When we recognize autistic burnout, the intervention changes. We do not simply push for more social exposure. We do not shame the teen for needing solitude. We help them understand their energy limits. We reduce unnecessary masking. We create recovery time. We teach self advocacy. We help the family understand that rest is not failure. Rest to them is regulation. And for many autistic teens, that recognition alone can be healing. Because finally, they are not being told they are lazy, dramatic, antisocial, or broken. They are being told your body has been working very hard. Let's learn how to support it. So masking is like the exhaustion of performing normal, right? Masking deserves its own conversation because it is one of the most painful and overlooked reality of many autistic individuals, especially those who are diagnosed later in life. Masking is the process of suppressing natural autistic traits and performing neurotypical behaviors in order to be accepted or to avoid negative attention. It may look like forcing eye contact, suppressing steaming, copying social behavior, rehearsing conversations, controlling facial expressions, and constantly monitoring how others are responding. And the world often rewards masking. Yeah, people say, you're doing so well. You don't seem autistic at all. You're so high functioning. But what they often mean is, your autism is not inconveniencing me now. And that is a painful thing to say because the person may be suffering internally while being praised externally. Masking can help someone survive socially, but survival is not the same as wellness. Over time, constant masking can contribute to anxiety, depression, burnout, identity confusion, and emotional exhaustion. Imagine spending every day editing yourself. That is exhausting on its own. Imagine entering every room and immediately scanning for what version of you will be safest here. Imagine never fully relaxing because you are constantly trying to appear acceptable. Eventually, you may ask, who am I? Well, when am I not performing? That question can be frightening as heck, right? Because when someone has spent a lifetime adapting to other people's comfort, they may not know what their own comfort feels like anymore. This is especially common in adults who receive a late diagnosis. Many of them have spent years being treated for anxiety, depression, panic attacks, burnout, or relationship struggles without anyone asking whether neurodivergence might be part of their story. When they finally understand autism, they can be relief, but they can they can also be grief. Relief because life finally makes sense to them. Grief because they realize how long they blamed themselves for things that were never moral failures. They grieve the childhood where they were misunderstood. They grieve the years of forcing themselves into environments that harmed them. They grieve the relationships where they were called too sensitive, too intense, too distant, too rigid, too emotional, or too much. They grieve the version of themselves they were never allowed to become. And that grief deserves space, okay? Because diagnosis is not just clinical information. For many people, it is identity reconstruction or reconstruction. Yeah, it is going back through your life and realizing, quote and unquote, I was not broken, I was unsupported. So let me give you this other clinical scenario. You see a successful adult who was burnout, right? Imagine a successful businesswoman. You are educated, articulate, respected, and accomplished. On paper, she appeared functioning, but internally, she is exhausted. She comes in reporting anxiety, insomnia, irritability, and a sense that she cannot keep going. She says, I don't understand why life feels so hard for me. I should be grateful. I have achieved so much. Why am I so tired? As the conversation unfolds, you hear the pattern. She has always studied people. She learned how to behave by observing and mimicking. She rehearses phone calls before making them. She replays conversations afterwards, analyzing whether she said the right or the wrong thing. She dreads networking events, not because she lacks ambition, but because unstructured social interactions drain her. She keeps a polished exterior at work and collapses at home. She has sensory sensitivities she has minimized for years. She hates certain fabrics, but forces herself to wear professional clothing. She cannot tolerate certain office lighting, but tells herself she is being dramatic. She needs recovery time after meeting, but pushes through because everyone else seems fine. And then one day, her system says, hell no. That, my dear friend, is burnout. Not because she is weak, because she has been living beyond the nervous system's capacity for years. When she begins to understand autism, she does not suddenly become less capable. She becomes more honest. She begins to build a life that works with her brain instead of against it. She changes her lighting. She schedules recovery time. She reduces unnecessary social performance. She communicates more directly. She stops forcing herself to tolerate environments that deplete her simply to prove she can. That is not giving up. That is wisdom. Yes, our faith tells us that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. Now, I want to bring this into the spiritual dimension because this podcast is not only about the mind, it is about healing the mind and empowering the soul. And I believe we cannot have a complete conversation about acceptance without talking about worth, design, and identity. There is a scripture that says we are fearfully and wonderfully made. We all know that. And I want us to sit with that truth in the context of neurodiversity. Because sometimes we say fearfully and wonderfully made, but only apply it to what feels familiar, typical, or easy to understand. We say it when someone fits the mold, but do we still believe it when someone's brain processes differently? Do we still believe it when a child communicates through a device? Do we still believe it when a person avoids eye contact? Do we still believe it when someone stims, scripts, shuts down or needs accommodation? If we believe that human beings are created with dignity, then dignity cannot depend on conformity, right? Worth cannot depend on how easy someone is to manage. Purpose cannot depend on whether someone meets society's expectations of normal. What if difference is not evidence of defect, but evidence of the complexity of creation? What if the child who notices details others miss has a kind of perception we should honor? What if the adult who feels deeply is not too sensitive but deeply attuned? What if the autistic person who sees patterns, speaks honestly, loves intensely, or thinks systematically is carrying something valuable that the world truly needs? Faith should not be used to shame people into masking. Faith should not be used to tell parents to simply pray harder while ignoring clinical support. Faith should not be used to deny diagnosis or dismiss accommodations. True faith should deepen compassion. It should make us more humble, more patient, more willing to see the image of God in people whose minds do not work like ours. And for parents, I want to say this gently. Your child's diagnosis is not evidence that God made a mistake. Your child is not a spiritual failure or a spiritual punishment. Your child is not less blessed because their development looks different. Your child is still worthy, still purposeful, still loved, still wonderfully made. And yes, you can pray. And yes, you can seek God for strength, wisdom, patience, resources, and guidance. But you can also pursue therapy, evaluation, accommodation, speech support, occupational therapy, psychiatric care when needed, parental coaching, and community support. Faith and clinical care are not enemies. When held wisely, they can work together. So, when I'm speaking to parents about grief, guilt, and acceptance, if you are a parent of an autistic child, I want to speak to the part of you that may be tired, the part of you that loves your child deeply but sometimes feels overwhelmed, the part of you that has cried in the car after a school meeting, the part of you that has felt judged in public, the part of you that has wondered whether you are doing enough, the part of you that has searched symptoms online at midnight and scared yourself with worst case scenarios. Yes, I want you to hear this. Your feelings do not make you a bad person or a bad parent. It is it is possible to love your child completely and still feel overwhelmed by the journey. It is possible to accept your child and still grieve the ease you hope they would have. It is possible to be grateful for who they are and still feel afraid of how the world may treat them. Acceptance does not mean you never struggle. No. Acceptance means you refuse to make your child carry your fear or your shame. Many parents experience grief after a diagnosis, and that grief is often misunderstood. They are not necessarily grieving the child in front of them. No, they are grieving expectations, they are grieving the imagined timelines, they are grieving the assumptions that certain milestones could unfold easily. They are grieving the realization that advocacy may be a long road ahead. They are grieving the fact that the world may not always be gentle towards their child. But grief must eventually become responsibility. It must become learning. It must become advocacy. It must become a deeper love that says, I may not have expected this part, but I will learn how to walk it with you. Your child does not need you to be perfect. Your child does not need you to be willing. Willing to learn. Your child needs you to be willing to learn. That's what I meant to say. Willing to learn, willing to apologize, willing to listen, willing to advocate, willing to stop measuring them against someone else's developmental timeline. Willing that is to celebrate progress that other people may not understand. Maybe progress is trying a new food. Maybe progress is tolerating a haircut with less distress. Maybe progress to your child is using a communication card. Maybe progress is recovering faster after a meltdown. Maybe progress is just saying no. Maybe progress is asking for a break. Maybe progress is learning to identify what the body needs. Do not let the world make you overlook the small victories. In autism care, small victories are often sacred. So, what does practical acceptance at home look like? Acceptance at home looks like building a household that understands regulation. It means asking what your child needs before they fall apart, not only reacting after they do. It means noticing pattern, what happens before meltdown, what times of the day are hardest for this child, which environments drain them, what textures, sound, food, smell, or transitions are difficult for your child, what helps them recover or soothe, what makes things worse for them. It means understanding that behavior is data, not data to weaponize, but data to learn from. If your child melts down every time you go to a certain store, maybe the store is too loud, too bright, too crowded, or too unpredictable. If bedtime is always a battle, maybe the transition is too abrupt. The pajamas may feel uncomfortable for them. The room is too quiet or too dark, or the child needs a more predictable routine. If meal times, for instance, are stressful, maybe food texture is the issue, not stubbornness. Acceptance at home may look like using visual schedules, timers, sensory tools, quiet spaces, weighted blanket, noise reducing headphones, preferred routines, and clear expectations. With autistic kids, they hate instability in their environment. Clear expectations. It may look like giving warnings before transitions. For instance, if your child has to go to bed at 9 p.m. or say 8 p.m., you say, honey, 9 p.m. is in 2 hours. Be getting ready because you'll be going to bed. That they will anticipate that. Don't just come at 9 p.m. and say, it is time, it is bedtime, you need to shut down your stuff and go. That would cause some kind of frustration. So reducing unnecessary demand during high stress periods. But acceptance also means boundaries. Acceptance is not permissiveness, right? It does not mean a child can harm others without intervention. It does not mean there are no expectations. It means expectations are taught in a way that respects the child's nervous system. It means safety is maintained without shame. It means discipline becomes teaching, not humiliation. A child can learn boundaries and still be accepted. A child can be held accountable and still be understood. A child can need support and still be capable. The goal is not to remove all structure. The goal is to create structure that helps the child succeed. So, how can we help an autistic child at school? Now, let's talk about schools because this is where many autistic children either begin to feel empowered or begin to feel deeply misunderstood. Schools are often designed for neurotypical learning patterns. Sit still, listen quietly, transition quickly, work in groups, tolerate noise, respond verbally, follow instructions immediately, manage sensory input without complaint. But for autistic children, these expectations may require enormous effort. Autism acceptance in school requires more than kindness, it requires accommodation, training, and a willingness to interpret behavior through a nervous system lens. A child who leaves their seat may need movement. A child who does not answer immediately may need processing time. A child who refuses group work may be overwhelmed by social demands. A child who melts down after recess may be overloaded from noise, unpredictability, and peer interaction. Teachers are often overworked, and many genuinely want to help but lack training. That is why collaboration matters. Parents, clinicians, school counselors, occupational therapists, speech therapists, and teachers need to work together. The goal should not be to make the child appear less autistic. The goal should be to help the child access education while preserving their own dignity. Accommodations may include visual schedules, sensory breaks, preferential sitting, reducing noise exposure, written instructions, extra processing time, alternative communication methods, predictable routines, modified transitions, and access to a calm space. These are not spatial treatment, they are access tools. We do not accuse a child who needs glasses of getting an unfair advantage because they can see the board. We understand that glasses provide access. In the same way, accommodation provide access to learning for a nervous system that processes differently. You know, So, the artistic joy, strength, and the danger of only talking about struggle. Now, this is something I want us to pause for a minute. Now, I want to be careful because conversations about autism can become so focused on challenges that we forget to talk about autistic joy, autistic strength, and autistic ways of experiencing beauty. Acceptance means we do not romanticize autism and pretend there are no struggles, but it also means we do not reduce autism to struggle. Many autistic individuals have deep passions, intense focus, strong pattern recognition, honesty, creativity, loyalty, memory strengths, visual thinking, system thinking, empathy, humor, and unique ways of connecting. Some experience joy intensely. Some find comfort in repetition, special interests, routines, music, texture, facts, collections, movement, animals, nature, or spiritual practices. A child's spatial interest is not something to dismiss as an obsession. It may be a doorway into connection, learning, regulation, and identity. When we honor spatial interest, we communicate. What matters to you matters. That is powerful. Imagine a child who loves trains, for instance. Instead of constantly redirecting away from trains, we can use trains to teach reading, math, history, geography, storytelling, social communication, and emotional expression. Imagine a teen who loves animals. That interest may become a source of connection, career direction, volunteer work, or regulation. Imagine an odd adult who has deep knowledge of a subject. That passion may become purpose. Acceptance means making room for joy. It means not only asking what is hard for you, but also what lights you up. What do you feel most yourself? What gives you peace? What helps your nervous system feel safe? What do you love? Because autistic people deserve more than tolerance, they also deserve joy. So, with regards to our faith communities and autism acceptance, I want to speak to the churches, ministries, and spiritual spaces. You also have responsibility here. If we say everyone belongs, then belonging must include neurodivergent people and families. A child who makes noise during service is not a disruption to the presence of God. A person who rocks back and forth, flaps, or needs headphones is not being disrespectful. A family who arrives late, leaves early, or needs accommodation is not less faithful. Faith communities should be places of refuge, not places where families feel judged. That may mean creating sensory friendly spaces, training volunteers on how to handle such people, offering visual support, reducing shame, and asking families what would help. It may mean letting go of the idea that reverence always looks like stillness and silence. For some people, regulation may look like movement. Worship may look different. Attention may look different. Participation may look different. And I want to say this clearly. Please do not spiritualize autism in ways that harm families. Do not tell parents their child just needs more discipline. Do not imply that autism is caused by lack of prayers. Do not treat neurodivergence like something shameful that must be hidden. Pray, yes. Support, yes. But also learn. Also accommodate. Also be inclusive. Because love without understanding can still wound. Good intentions without education can still harm. If our faith is real, it should make us more compassionate, not more judgmental. So, I'll speak directly to the autistic listeners. If you are autistic, diagnosed or undiagnosed, child, teen, or adult, I want to speak directly to you. You are not too much. You are not too sensitive. You are not difficult. You are not broken. You are not a burden. You are not a failed version of someone else. You may have been misunderstood for a long time. You may have been told to stop doing the things that help you regulate. You may have been pressured to look people in the eye, socialize longer than you could tolerate, hide your interests, change your tone, soften your honesty, or pretend the world did not hurt you as much as it did. You may have learned to apologize for existing, but your existence is not something to apologize for. Your nervous system has been working hard. Your brain has been processing a world that often refused to slow down. Your body has been carrying things other people could not see. And if you are tired, it makes sense. If you are grieving, it makes sense. If you are angry, it makes sense. If you are relieved to finally have language for your experience, it makes sense. You deserve support that does not erase you. You deserve relationships where you do not have to perform constantly. You deserve spaces where communication is respected, where your communication is respected. You deserve care that sees your whole humanity. And if faith is part of your life, please hear this. God is not confused by your wiring. God is not disappointed in the way your brain works. You are seen, you are known, you are loved. Not after you become easier for others to understand or tolerate, not after you mask better, not after you force yourself into someone else's mold. You are worthy just the way you are. So let us shift from correction to connection. Autism acceptance asks us to make that shift from correction to connection. It asks us to stop seeing every behavior as something to eliminate and start asking what it means. It asks us to stop centering convenience and start centering dignity. It asks us to stop measuring success by how normal someone appears and start measuring success by how supported, safe, regulated, authentic they are. Correction says, stop that. Connections asks, what do we need? Correction says, look at me. Connections asks, are you able to listen better without eye contact? Correction says, you're overreacting. Connection asks, is this too much for your nervous system? Correction says, why can't you just be like everyone else? Now, connection says, you belong here just the way you are. That, my dear folks, is the heart of acceptance. And acceptance does not mean we stop helping. It means we help differently. It means support is not about erasing autism, but reducing suffering. It means we teach skills without shaming identity. It means we build capacity without demanding performance. It means we honor the person while addressing their needs. So here is my closing reflection. So what are we willing to change as a society? So I want to leave you with this question. If you are a parent, are you trying to understand your child's nervous system, or are you trying to manage their behavior? If you are a teacher, are you asking what support would help this child access learning, or are you expecting them to adapt without accommodation? If you're a clinician, yes, some of us also misunderstand autism. Are you listening to autistic voices, or are you only relying on outdated models of what autism should look like? If you're a part of a faith-based community, are you making room for neurodivergent people to belong fully, or only when they can sit quietly and blend in? And if you are autistic, I want you to ask yourself a different question. What parts of yourself have you been taught to hide that may deserve compassion? What needs have you minimized because other people did not understand them? What would it look like to build a life that works with your nervous system instead of against it? Autism acceptance is not a hashtag. It is not a month. It is not a color. It is not a puzzle piece. It's or a societal or a social media post. It is a daily practice of seeing people fully. It is a commitment to dignity. It is a willingness to change environments, expectations, language, and systems so that autistic individuals are not forced to spend their lives proving they deserve respect. Because, my dear folks, because different does not mean less. Different does not mean broken, or different does not mean wrong. Sometimes different is simply asking the world to become more compassionate, more flexible, more patient, and more human. So if this episode resonated with you, I invite you to subscribe to Healing the Mind and Empowering the Soul podcast. Share this episode with a parent, a teacher, a clinician, a faith leader, or family member who needs to hear this. And if you're looking for integrative, compassionate, neurodivergent, affirming mental health care, you can reach out to Serenity on our website. Until next time, take care of your mind, protect your peace, and honor your healing. This is Sidi Justinsky, and this is Healing the Mind and Empowering the Soul podcast. Thank you for watching or listening.